The cold on Titan was unlike anything Ethan Clarke had ever felt. Even through the thick, insulated suit of his exploration gear, the wind cut at him like tiny knives. He had walked through snowy mountains on Earth before, and he had worked in the deep Antarctic stations. But Titan's moon had a sharpness that made everything feel alive. Every gust of wind made him shiver, and the horizon seemed endless, stretching in icy whites and pale blues. Ethan had been sent on a reconnaissance mission. His job was simple: gather information about the ice caverns near the northern pole and take samples for the Earth Science Council. The council had detected strange energy readings in this area, and they needed to know if there was anything unusual. That was the official mission. But Ethan had learned early in his career that missions were rarely simple. Something about this place made his instincts uneasy. The sky above was a dull gray, but faint light from Saturn shimmered behind the clouds. The light made the ice sparkle, almost like millions of tiny stars embedded in the frozen surface. He paused for a moment, letting the beauty of the place sink in, despite the cold biting through his gloves. Titan had a strange quietness to it. Even the wind seemed to whisper rather than roar. As Ethan climbed a small ridge, his sensors picked up something unusual. There was a heat signature ahead, barely stronger than the surrounding environment, but it was there. He frowned. People weren't supposed to be here. No human team had been in this region for weeks. He adjusted his visor and looked closer. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. But as he moved closer, he saw a figure huddled against a jagged ice formation. She was small, pale, and trembling. Ethan froze for a second, unsure what he was seeing. Her skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, like she had tiny veins of light running under her skin. Her hair floated slightly in the wind, silver white, and her eyes reflected a strange intelligence, catching the faint light and shining like mirrors. "Hello?" Ethan called, his voice echoing slightly in the icy air. He did not want to startle her, but he needed to make contact. The figure shivered violently and moved a little, her eyes meeting his. Ethan noticed her lips moving, but no sound came. He frowned, unsure if she could speak or if she even understood him. He slowly removed one of his gloves and raised a hand in a universal gesture of peace. "It's okay. I'm here to help," he said softly. The wind caught his words and carried them away, but he repeated them, louder this time. "I'm a human. You're safe with me." The figure hesitated. Her glowing skin dimmed slightly, almost as if she were considering whether to trust him. Ethan stepped closer, careful not to scare her. The ice under his boots crunched with each step. He could see that she was weak, shivering so badly that her entire body trembled. She leaned against the ice wall, barely holding herself upright. "Cold," she said in a soft, broken voice. Her words were strange, clipped, but Ethan could understand her meaning. She was cold. Dangerously so. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had trained for emergencies, for rescue operations. But something about this moment felt different. He had rescued people before, humans in dangerous situations, but he had never seen anyone like her. She was not human. Her features were delicate, her body smaller than an average human female, but her presence was strong. Her eyes held centuries of knowledge, or at least that was what it seemed like. "Come with me," Ethan said gently, holding out his gloved hand. He waited patiently, giving her space to decide. He did not want to scare her. For a long moment, she did nothing. The wind whipped around them, and Ethan could see frost forming on her glowing skin. He could see her teeth chattering beneath her lips. She needed help, and she needed it now. "Please," Ethan said again, this time almost begging. "I can help you. You'll be safe." Finally, she nodded slightly, and Ethan felt a rush of relief. Slowly, carefully, he helped her stand. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile. He supported her as they began walking down the ridge toward a safer spot, away from the sharp wind. Each step was slow and careful. The ground was slippery, and one wrong move could send them both tumbling into the ice below. As they moved, Ethan tried to learn more about her. "What's your name?" he asked. She tilted her head but did not answer. "It's okay. You don't have to speak yet. I just want to help." Her hand touched his arm briefly, and he felt a faint warmth where her skin met his suit. It was strange. He had expected nothing from her, but this tiny gesture felt meaningful, almost like a connection forming. He could not explain it, and he did not try. He only focused on keeping her safe. They reached a small outcropping of rocks that provided some shelter from the wind. Ethan helped her sit down and checked her condition. Her breathing was shallow and her body was still trembling. He activated a portable heat pack from his suit, pressing it gently against her back. The warmth spread slowly, and he could see her glow intensify slightly as she began to relax. "There," he said softly. "You'll be warmer soon. Just stay still." She looked at him then, her eyes wide, glowing faintly in the dim light. It was the first time she seemed to truly notice him. Ethan smiled, though he kept his tone calm. "I'm Ethan. I'm a human. You're safe here with me." She repeated his words, awkwardly at first, but clearly trying to imitate. "Ethan, human, safe." Her voice was soft, melodic, but clearly not her first language. Ethan nodded. "That's right," he said gently. "You'll be okay." For the next hour, he sat with her, letting the heat pack do its work while he scanned the surroundings. Titan was not empty. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, the occasional crack of ice shifting under pressure, but nothing seemed immediately dangerous. Still, Ethan kept his hand near his sidearm, ready for any sudden threats. Slowly, the woman began to relax. She leaned against the warm heat pack, her glowing skin pulsing faintly. Ethan could see her lips forming shapes as she tried to speak again. Words did not come clearly, but he understood enough. "Storm, ship, lost." Ethan frowned. She had been in a storm and lost her ship. That explained why she was alone here. He had read reports of alien craft crashes on Titan before, but he had never encountered one personally, and certainly never an alien survivor. "You lost your ship?" he asked carefully. She nodded, then closed her eyes briefly, shivering again despite the warmth. He realized that she was not only physically cold, but emotionally exhausted as well. The fear of being alone in a frozen world had almost crushed her. Ethan felt a pang of empathy. He had been alone in dangerous environments before, but nothing compared to what she must have felt. He needed to keep her calm, to help her regain some trust. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "I'm here. I won't leave. You're safe." She opened her eyes and looked at him. The faint glow in them seemed to brighten slightly. She raised a trembling hand and touched his arm again. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In that touch, Ethan felt a connection, fragile but real. It was as if they both understood something deeper than words. Cold," she whispered again. Ethan nodded. He understood. She was still cold. He activated another heat pack, placing it on her chest this time. The warmth spread slowly, and he could feel her body relaxing further. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, her glowing skin pulsing in a steady rhythm. It was the first sign that she was beginning to recover, at least partially. Ethan spent the next hour helping her stabilize. He offered water from his suit's supply, and she drank carefully. He learned to recognize small gestures from her, tilting her head, the way she touched the heat pack, even the way her eyes shifted. Each gesture told him something. Slowly, he began to understand her language, not in words, but in feelings. By the time the storm began to die down, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. The alien woman, fragile and strange though she was, had begun to trust him, and he realized that he felt a bond forming as well. It was quiet, unspoken, but powerful. Titan was still cold, and danger was still present, but for the first time, Ethan felt hope. He had found someone in need, and he had helped her. And in doing so, he had found something he had not expected, a connection that might last forever. She looked at him one last time before the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. Her glowing eyes met his. And in that moment, no words were needed. They both understood. Trust had been formed, and a bond had begun. Ethan helped her stand again, supporting her as they moved toward a safer area where he could set up a temporary shelter. The day was beginning, and with it, the promise of new challenges. But whatever came next, he knew one thing clearly. He would not let her face it alone. Together they walked, human and alien, two beings from different worlds, bound by trust and the quiet understanding that some connections could survive even the coldest, harshest places in the universe. Ethan had managed to get the alien woman Leora to a safer spot. The small ice cave he had found offered some shelter from Titan's relentless wind, and the faint light from Saturn's rings made the walls shimmer. It was not much, but it was enough for now. He knelt on the icy floor and carefully checked the heat packs. They were working, slowly warming her fragile body. She lay on a piece of cloth he had brought from his suit, her small hands clutching it. Her glow had dimmed slightly, but her breathing was steady. Ethan watched her closely, noticing the subtle movements of her chest and the way her eyes flickered as she looked at him. She seemed to be studying him now, as if trying to understand who he really was. Ethan wanted to know more about her, but he had to be careful. Alien species were not always friendly, and even if she needed help, sudden questions could scare her. He started slowly, speaking in calm, simple words. "What happened to you?" he asked. "Your ship? Is it broken?" She looked at him, and her lips moved, trying to form words. Finally, she said something that sounded like, "Storm, crash, lost." Ethan nodded. He understood. Her ship had crashed in the storm, and she had survived alone. That explained why she had been so cold, weak, and scared. He wanted to comfort her, but he also wanted to make her feel safe. "You are safe now," he said gently. "No storm can hurt you here. You are with me." She looked at him and nodded slightly. Then she made a small sound, almost like a sigh. Ethan realized that she was beginning to relax. It was a small step, but it was important. Trust was slow to build, and he knew that. He decided to make her more comfortable. He opened a small compartment in his suit and brought out extra thermal blankets. Carefully, he wrapped her in one. She shivered at first, but when the warmth spread through her body, she let out a small sound of relief. Ethan smiled, though quietly. "Better?" he asked. She nodded. That simple gesture was enough for him. It was a sign that she was beginning to trust him. Time passed slowly in the ice cave. Ethan took out his small data pad and tried to communicate in pictures, drawing simple symbols to show food, water, and warmth. She watched him carefully, tilting her head as if she were learning something new. Then she used her fingers to point at herself, then at the drawings. Ethan nodded. He understood that she needed food. He reached into his supplies and took out a small pack of nutrient bars. He offered one to her, holding it gently. She hesitated, looking at him with wide, glowing eyes, but then she took it. Slowly, she ate it, carefully tasting each bite. Ethan waited patiently, not rushing her. "You need strength," he said, "strong to survive." She nodded again, her lips forming the words slowly. "Strong. Survive." The hours passed. They shared the quiet of the cave, broken only by the occasional creak of ice outside. Ethan watched her closely, noticing small gestures she made, how she shifted slightly to stay warm, how her fingers touched the blanket, how her eyes followed his movements. Each small gesture told him more about her, about how she thought and felt. Finally, she spoke again, trying words that were strange but understandable. "Name, Leora." Ethan smiled. "Leora," he said. "That's a beautiful name. I am Ethan." She repeated it carefully. "Ethan." The sound of it seemed to make her happy. Ethan could see her glow brighten slightly. He realized that names were important. They were a first step toward connection. "You alone?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Alone. Lost. Crew." He understood. Her crew had been lost in the storm. She was the only one left. Ethan felt a deep sense of responsibility. She was fragile, but she had survived this long. He could not let anything happen to her now. "You are not alone anymore," he said. "I will help you." She looked at him, her eyes glowing brightly, and for the first time Ethan felt that she understood more than just words. She understood his intention. The night grew darker, though Titan's dim light still shone faintly through the cave opening. Ethan decided they needed to rest. He helped her sit back against the ice wall, keeping the heat packs close. He made sure she was warm enough, and then he sat nearby, watching her carefully. Even in sleep, she seemed alert. Her body twitched slightly as if she were reacting to distant sounds, and her glowing skin dimmed and brightened in a slow rhythm. Ethan realized that her senses were much sharper than a human's. She could hear things he could not, see things he could barely notice. He wondered what kind of world she came from. Her skin glowed faintly, and she had the intelligence of someone who had lived much longer than a human could. He wanted to know her story, but he knew that he could not push. She would tell him when she was ready. As he watched, he felt a strange sense of connection growing between them. It was quiet, unspoken, but strong. She had trusted him enough to accept help, to eat, to rest. And he had protected her, kept her warm, and offered comfort. That trust, fragile as it was, felt precious. Suddenly, a noise outside the cave made him tense. A faint cracking, like ice breaking, echoed from the surface. He rose carefully, holding out a hand to stop Leora from moving. Her glowing eyes focused on him, alert and wary. "Stay here," he said softly. He stepped to the cave opening and looked out. The ice outside had shifted slightly, revealing the silhouette of a creature moving across the frozen plain. It was large, taller than a human, with long limbs and sharp features. Its eyes reflected light, making it hard to see clearly. Ethan's heart raced. Titan was not empty. He had known there were predators here, but he had not expected one so close. He took a deep breath and thought carefully. He needed to protect Leora, but he also had to be careful. One wrong move could mean disaster. He stepped back into the cave and gestured for Leora to stay low. She crouched behind the blankets, watching him with wide eyes. Ethan pulled out a small stun baton from his suit. It was enough to deter most creatures, but he knew he could not fight for long if it came to a real attack. The creature moved closer, sniffing the air, its gaze searching for warmth. Ethan kept still, hoping it would pass. He could see Leora trembling slightly behind him. He placed a hand near hers, letting her know he was there. The contact seemed to calm her, and her glow dimmed slightly, showing less fear. After a tense moment, the creature moved past the cave without noticing them. Ethan exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. He looked at Leora, who was now staring at him with wide, trusting eyes. He smiled gently. "You see?" he said softly. "You are safe. I am here." She reached out and touched his arm again, her small fingers warm against his suit. Ethan realized that this bond between them was growing stronger. It was no longer just about survival. They had begun to understand each other. even across the vast differences between human and alien. The rest of the night passed quietly. Ethan and Leora stayed in the cave, sharing warmth and quiet moments. He tried to teach her simple words, and she repeated them slowly. She began to mimic his movements, learning human gestures, while he studied hers, learning alien signals. By morning, they had developed a rhythm. Leora could now point to objects she wanted, and Ethan could understand her intentions. She no longer seemed as fragile or scared. Her glow was steadier, and her movements more confident. Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had helped her survive the storm, and she was beginning to trust him. That trust was more valuable than any mission report. He realized that in this vast, frozen world, humanity's greatest strength was not technology or weapons, but the ability to care for others, even those from distant stars. As dawn broke, the light from Saturn grew brighter, casting long shadows across the ice. Ethan and Leora stepped outside the cave carefully, testing the ground. The air was still cold, but with the heat packs and their shared body warmth, it was manageable. Ethan pointed toward the horizon. "We need to find shelter," he said. Leora nodded and took his hand. They walked together, careful with each step on the icy ground. It was slow work, but they moved as a team. For the first time, Ethan felt that the mission was more than just science. It was about connection, about trust, about the bond that could form between different beings in a vast and lonely universe. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he and Leora would face them together. And as they moved forward, side by side, the cold of Titan seemed less harsh, the wind less biting, and the vast emptiness of the moon a little less lonely. For the first time, Ethan realized that helping another being, even one from another world, could change him forever. The morning light stretched across the icy plains of Titan, making the ice glitter like tiny crystals. Ethan Clarke helped Leora carefully as they moved away from the cave. She had grown stronger overnight, and her steps were steadier, but Ethan stayed close. He could feel her nervous energy, even though her trust in him was growing. "Careful here," Ethan said, pointing to a patch of ice that glistened differently. He stepped first, testing it with his boot. It was slippery, but strong enough. Leora nodded and followed, her small hands brushing the ice as if checking its strength. The frozen landscape was beautiful but dangerous. Deep cracks and hidden crevices stretched for miles, and the wind carried a biting cold that could take energy away quickly. Ethan kept scanning their surroundings with his visor sensors. There were signs of movement ahead, tracks in the snow, and the faint sound of shifting ice. Something was out there. "Tracks," Ethan whispered. He pointed to the marks in the ice. "Not ours. Something large." Leora stopped and looked closely. Her glowing eyes widened. She crouched low and touched the tracks, her fingers moving quickly in a way that Ethan could not understand. He realized she was reading the path, judging the size and speed of the creatures. She looked at him and gestured, then touched her chest. He understood. She wanted to help. "You can help," Ethan said. "We do it together." They moved carefully, step by step. Ethan kept his hand near his stun baton, ready for anything. Leora seemed to sense the danger differently. Her glowing skin pulsed faintly, a rhythm that matched her movements. She seemed to know when to move slowly and when to pause, as if she could feel the presence of creatures in the ice around them. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from a nearby ridge. Ethan froze. Leora crouched beside him, her body tense. The snow shifted violently and a creature emerged. It was massive, taller than a human, with long, thin limbs and dark, glossy skin that reflected the dim light. Its eyes were large and black, and it moved with surprising speed, sniffing the air as it searched. "Stay behind me," Ethan whispered. He stepped slightly in front of Leora, holding his baton. She nodded and crouched, glowing faintly in the dim light. The creature roared, a low, guttural sound that made the ice vibrate. It charged toward them. Ethan fired a stun pulse from his baton, hitting it in the shoulder. The creature howled in pain but did not stop. Ethan stepped back, keeping himself between the creature and Leora. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing her hand. Together they ran across the icy ground, careful to avoid the hidden cracks. The creature chased them, its long limbs making it almost fly over the ice. Ethan could feel his heart pounding, and he knew that Leora was moving as fast as she could. They reached a small ridge of ice and climbed quickly. Ethan helped Leora up first, then pulled himself up. The creature followed, but its large body made it slower on the narrow path. Ethan knew they could use the terrain to their advantage. "Here," he said, pointing to a narrow crevice ahead. "We can trap it." Leora looked at him, then at the crevice. She seemed to understand immediately. Ethan moved first, reaching inside his pack and taking out a small portable net designed for large animals. He held it ready, and Leora helped him carry it. Together, they positioned it across the crevice. The creature lunged toward them again. Ethan jumped aside, and Leora followed. The creature's claws scraped the ice, sending small shards flying. Then it hit the net. It struggled violently, its large body pressing against it, but the crevice prevented it from moving forward. Ethan and Leora watched cautiously. The creature was strong, but they had slowed it down. Ethan approached carefully, holding his baton ready. The creature roared again, trying to break free. Leora stepped forward and touched the creature's arm lightly. Her glowing skin pulsed, and the creature froze, as if sensing something different. Ethan stared. You can calm it?" he asked. Leora nodded slightly. Her glow grew brighter, and the creature's movements slowed. It stopped struggling completely, staring at her with those large black eyes. "That's incredible," Ethan whispered. He realized that Leora had abilities beyond anything he had imagined. Not only could she survive in this harsh environment, but she could influence other creatures. It was a gift, and he could see how powerful it could be. The creature turned slowly and moved back, as if respecting her. Leora's glow dimmed slightly, showing that her effort had taken energy. Ethan stepped closer and touched her shoulder. "You saved us," he said softly. She looked at him, her glowing eyes full of something he could not name. Pride, relief, maybe gratitude. For a moment, they simply stood there, catching their breath. The wind had died down slightly, leaving the icy plain silent except for the occasional crack of shifting ice. Ethan realized that they had survived their first real danger together. "You are strong," he said. "Not just you. Humans, too." Leora tilted her head, trying to understand. Ethan smiled. "Humans care. We fight to protect each other. That's why we survive." She seemed to understand. Her glowing pulse grew steady again. Ethan knew that this bond between them was more than survival. It was trust. They had saved each other, and that trust was beginning to grow. They continued walking, careful but more confident now. Leora moved more steadily, and Ethan noticed that she was learning to adapt to the terrain. He pointed out cracks, weak ice, and slopes, teaching her slowly. She followed, imitating his movements, learning quickly. After a while, they reached a larger ice cave, one that could offer shelter for the rest of the day. Ethan helped Leora inside and set up the heat packs. She sank into the warmth, glowing softly, and Ethan could see that she was recovering from the strain of the chase. "You did well," he said quietly. "We did well." She nodded, and for the first time, she smiled slightly. It was a small gesture, but it warmed Ethan more than the heat packs ever could. He knew they needed to rest and plan their next move. Titan was vast and dangerous, and the storm that had wrecked Leora's ship might return. But for now, they were safe. Together, they had faced danger and survived. That was enough to build confidence. Ethan prepared a small meal from his supplies, breaking it into tiny portions for Leora. She ate carefully, watching him closely as he ate. It was a quiet moment, but it felt important. Sharing food was a human way of showing trust and care, and she seemed to understand that. As they rested, Ethan studied her more closely. Her glowing skin pulsed in soft rhythms, and her eyes reflected light like tiny stars. He could see the intelligence and curiosity in her gaze. She was learning from him, and he was learning from her. "You understand humans?" he asked. She tilted her head, then nodded slowly. "Try, learn," she said. Her words broken but understandable. Ethan smiled. She was trying to communicate, to connect. That was more than he had expected. "I'll teach you," he said. "Step by step. We'll figure it out together." She nodded, her glow brightening slightly. He realized that this was more than survival now. They were building a bridge between their worlds, learning to understand each other despite differences in language, culture, and species. The day passed slowly. They explored the cave, marking weak ice and noting areas that might be dangerous. Leora followed his lead, moving carefully and testing her abilities. Ethan noticed that she could sense subtle changes in the environment, predicting when ice would crack or when a small crevice might give way. He was impressed. "You are amazing," he said quietly. She glanced at him, her glow pulsing with curiosity. "Amazing?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes, strong, smart. You can survive here, and you helped me survive too." She considered his words, repeating them slowly. "Strong, survive, help." Ethan nodded again. That was enough. She understood. By evening, they had set up a small safe area in the cave. Ethan prepared a heat source and blankets. Leora rested, glowing softly while he kept watch. The trust between them had grown stronger. They were no longer just two beings surviving. They were a team. Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Humanity's strength was not just in technology or weapons. It was in courage, in empathy, in the ability to protect and care for others. He realized that Leora was beginning to see that too. As night fell on Titan, the wind howled outside, but inside the cave, they were safe. Ethan watched her glow, steady and calm, and he felt a strange warmth in his chest. This bond they had formed was more than survival. It was a connection that could last, even across worlds and species. He sat beside her, keeping a quiet watch. Every now and then, she touched his arm lightly, a small reminder of trust and companionship. Ethan smiled softly. They were ready for whatever Titan might throw at them next. Together, they could face anything. And in that quiet cave, surrounded by ice and darkness, human and alien learned something that words could not fully express: trust, courage, and the beginnings of a bond that would grow stronger with every challenge they faced. The next morning, Titan's pale light filtered through the icy cave walls, casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan Clark was already awake, checking the surroundings and scanning for any signs of danger. Leora stirred beside him, her small body glowing softly in the dim light. She looked more rested than yesterday, her movements steadier and her eyes brighter. Ethan smiled as he watched her. "Good morning," he said softly. She blinked slowly and repeated, "Good morning." The sound of her voice was soft and musical, and it filled the cave with a quiet warmth. They had survived the night, but Ethan knew the danger was far from over. Titan was unpredictable, and Leora's ship had been destroyed. They were alone on a frozen world, surrounded by predators and treacherous terrain. He needed to plan their next steps carefully. "Today we explore," he said. "We need food, water, and maybe a safer place to rest. We move carefully, together." Leora nodded, her glow pulsing in response. She seemed to understand, though she did not speak clearly yet. Ethan packed their supplies and checked the heat packs. Leora followed closely, her small hands brushing against his suit for guidance. He noticed that she was learning quickly. She could read the ice, sense weak spots, and even anticipate the sounds of creatures moving nearby. As they walked, Ethan tried to teach her more words. He pointed to the frozen ground. "Ice," he said. She touched it and repeated, "Ice." Then he pointed to the sky. "Sky," she repeated slowly. "Sky." It was slow, but she was learning. "You are smart," Ethan said. She tilted her head, a faint smile on her lips. "Smart, Leora," she repeated. Ethan nodded. "Yes, you are smart. Strong, too." She repeated the words, glowing brighter. The day passed slowly as they moved across the icy plains. They searched for food and water, relying on small sensors in Ethan's suit. Leora helped by pointing to areas that looked promising. Ethan realized that her senses were sharper than his. She could detect subtle changes in the environment that he could barely notice. Around midday, they reached a frozen stream. Ethan knelt and tested the ice. It was thin in places, but he could see water flowing underneath. He showed Leora how to collect some safely. She followed carefully, dipping a small container into the water and handing it to him. "Good," Ethan said. "Water, drink." She repeated, "Drink." He smiled. Teaching her simple words made her more confident, and he could see her glowing brighter as she learned. They rested for a short time by the stream. Ethan ate a small meal, and Leora watched, mimicking his movements. She had learned to use her hands in a human-like way, though she still moved gracefully and differently from him. Ethan realized that she was adapting, learning not just the language, but human habits and gestures. Suddenly, a sound echoed across the ice. Ethan froze. Leora stiffened beside him. The sound was low and rolling like a distant drum, but it grew louder quickly. Ethan scanned the area. Dozens of large creatures emerged from behind ice ridges. They were bigger than the one they had encountered before, with dark, sleek bodies and long, sharp limbs. "Run!" Ethan shouted. He grabbed Leora's hand, and they started moving across the ice, careful to avoid the weak spots he had noticed earlier. The creatures pursued them, moving faster than he expected. Leora's glow pulsed brightly, and she moved with him, matching his pace despite the danger. Ethan realized that she could sense the creature's movements before he could. She pointed and gestured, warning him of weak ice and dangerous slopes. They worked together, coordinating without words. Their trust had grown, and it showed. They reached a narrow ridge that overlooked a frozen valley. Ethan stopped and crouched. "We can use the ridge," he said. "They can't follow easily. We can fight if we need." Leora nodded, glowing brighter as she prepared herself. The creatures approached, their black eyes fixed on them. Ethan stepped forward, holding his stun baton. Leora raised her hands slightly, and Ethan noticed her glow intensify. It was like she was gathering energy. He did not understand how, but he trusted her. The creatures attacked. Ethan moved quickly, striking with his baton, hitting the closest ones in the shoulder. Leora moved beside him, using her glowing hands to push one creature away with a sudden force. It staggered backward, confused. Ethan realized that her abilities were powerful, but she was careful, precise, not reckless. Together, they fought, covering each other. Ethan's human strength and quick thinking combined with Leora's alien abilities made them a formidable team. One creature lunged at Ethan from the side. Leora reacted instantly, pushing it back with a wave of her hand. Ethan struck it with his baton. The creatures hesitated. They had never faced a team like this before. One of them roared and ran back, followed by another. Ethan and Leora took advantage of the hesitation and moved forward, retreating to safer ground. When the creatures finally dispersed, Ethan knelt beside Leora. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, her glow pulsing gently. Okay, thanks, Ethan, she said softly. You saved us, he said. We saved each other. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting light like tiny stars. Ethan realized that she understood more than words could explain. Trust, courage, and teamwork had brought them through danger. They rested on the ridge, catching their breath. Ethan examined her carefully. She had small scratches, but nothing serious. He cleaned them gently and applied a small healing gel from his supplies. Leora watched quietly, learning each step. You are brave, Ethan said. She repeated slowly, brave. Her glow brightened. You, brave, she added, gesturing to him. Ethan smiled. It felt good to hear her recognize his courage, even though it was nothing compared to hers. They continued their journey, moving carefully across the ice. Ethan showed Leora how to read the terrain, how to step on strong ice, and how to avoid hidden crevices. She followed closely, learning quickly. He realized that her alien senses and human adaptability complemented each other perfectly. As the day went on, Ethan tried to teach her more words, showing simple objects and actions. Leora repeated them slowly, her glow brightening each time she got a word right. By late afternoon, she could say simple sentences like, water here, ice strong, and Ethan help. Ethan smiled. They were making progress, not just in surviving, but in understanding each other. He could see her confidence growing, and he felt proud. For the first time, he realized that their bond was deeper than survival. It was about learning, trust, and connection. Around evening, they found another small cave for shelter. Ethan set up heat packs and blankets, making sure Leora was comfortable. She sat close to him, glowing softly. Ethan noticed that she was studying him, watching his movements and gestures. He realized that she was learning more than just words. She was learning human behavior, emotions, and patterns. You are learning fast, Ethan said quietly. She looked at him, glowing brighter. Learn fast, she repeated. Ethan smiled. Yes, together, we learn. She repeated slowly. Together, learn. For the first time, they shared a quiet moment without fear or danger. The wind howled outside, but inside the cave, they were safe. Ethan looked at her, realizing how much he had grown to care for her. Not just as a survivor, but as a companion, a friend, and perhaps more. You are not alone anymore, he said softly. She looked at him, her glowing eyes reflecting trust and understanding. Not alone, she repeated. Ethan nodded. Never alone. They rested for the night, side by side, sharing warmth and quiet. Ethan thought about the journey ahead. Titan was dangerous, and Leora's ship was still lost. But together, they could face anything. Their bond had grown through danger, trust, and learning. It was strong, and it would only grow stronger. As they drifted to sleep, Ethan realized something important. Humanity's strength was not just technology, weapons, or intelligence. It was empathy, courage, and the ability to form connections, even with beings from distant worlds. Leora had trusted him, and he had protected her. Together they had survived, and together they would continue to survive. Outside, Titan's icy winds howled, and the frozen landscape stretched endlessly. But inside the small cave, human and alien rested, bonded by trust, courage, and the quiet understanding that they were no longer alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, learning from each other and growing stronger. And in that moment, Ethan knew something profound. Their connection was more than survival. It was a beginning, a bond that could last forever, across stars and worlds. The morning light on Titan was pale and weak, but it was enough to show the frozen landscape stretching endlessly in every direction. Ethan Clarke and Leora had survived 2 nights in the icy wilderness. They had faced creatures, storms, and the harsh cold, but they had grown stronger together. Their bond was no longer fragile. It was real and deep, built on trust, courage, and shared experience. Ethan helped Leora stand, steadying her as she stretched her small body. Her glow was steady now, brighter than ever. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting light like tiny stars, and he smiled. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. They had a goal now. Ethan's mission sensors had picked up faint energy signals that could lead them to Leora's ship, or at least parts of it. They didn't know what they would find, but they knew they had to try. It was their only hope of escape and understanding what had happened. The journey was difficult. The ice was slippery and the wind was sharp, cutting through their suits. But they moved carefully, step by step, guiding each other across dangerous patches. Leora seemed to sense every weak spot in the ice before Ethan did, pointing with small gestures and warning him. They had learned to communicate without words, their movements and gestures becoming a language of trust. As they approached a rocky ridge, Ethan noticed something strange. The energy readings were stronger here. He adjusted his visor, scanning for heat or movement. The ground was littered with ice shards and debris. Something had landed here recently, or at least not too long ago. "Look," he whispered, pointing to a twisted piece of metal half buried in ice. Leora stepped closer, examining it. Her glowing hands passed over the metal, and she let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Ethan understood her meaning. This was part of her ship. They moved carefully, following the trail of wreckage across the icy plain. Pieces of metal and glowing wires stuck out from the ice. Ethan helped Leora climb over larger shards, supporting her carefully. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and trust. Finally, they reached the main wreckage. The ship was partially buried in ice, twisted and broken. But there were signs of life. Ethan scanned the area carefully. There were no creatures nearby, but the energy readings were stronger than ever. "This is it," he said softly. "We found it." Leora's glow pulsed brighter, and she stepped closer to the wreckage. She touched the metal gently, as if trying to feel it, and then she turned to Ethan. "Home," she whispered. Her voice was small, but filled with emotion. Ethan nodded, understanding. They spent hours examining the wreckage. Ethan worked carefully, checking for hazards, while Leora seemed to communicate with the ship in ways he could not understand. Her glowing hands passed over panels and wires, and occasionally the ship emitted faint pulses in response. It was as if she was speaking to it. "Can it work?" Ethan asked, hopeful but unsure. Leora looked at him and nodded slowly. Then she gestured for him to step back. Suddenly the ship lit up. Panels glowed, wires hummed, and a low, melodic sound filled the air. Ethan stepped closer cautiously. Then the ship spoke, not in words, but in a series of pulses and vibrations that Leora seemed to understand perfectly. Her glow pulsed rapidly. She raised her hands, and the ship responded, lifting slightly from the ice as systems began to stabilize. Ethan watched in awe. He realized that Leora was not just alien. She had a deep connection to her technology, almost like a bond. She could make the ship respond in ways no human could. "Ethan," she whispered. Her voice was full of emotion. "Alive. Again." He smiled. "We did it," he said. "We survived. We helped each other." Leora nodded. She touched his arm, a small gesture that spoke more than words. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. This bond between them had grown through danger, fear, and survival. It was real. The ship began to stabilize further. Ethan could see that the engines were powering up, the panels glowing steadily. They had done it, together. But just as they were about to relax, a distant rumble shook the ice. Ethan's sensors detected movement, creatures, more than before, moving quickly across the frozen plain toward them. They had drawn attention. "Get inside!" Ethan shouted. He grabbed Leora's hand, and they ran to the ship. She followed without hesitation, glowing brighter with each step. They climbed into the ship's small cockpit. Ethan helped her to the controls, though he did not know what she was doing. He only trusted her. The creatures reached the ridge. Ethan could see them from the cockpit, dozens of black, sleek forms moving swiftly over the ice. They were fast, and they were closing in. Leora's hands moved over the controls with precision, her glow brightening, filling the cockpit with light. Ethan watched in awe as the ship responded. Panels lit up, engines hummed, and a protective shield formed around them. "Hold on," Ethan said. The ship lifted from the ice, moving slowly at first, then faster. The creatures tried to follow, but the shield prevented them from getting close. Ethan realized that Leora's abilities were part of the ship's system. She could make it move, defend, and respond like no one else. The creatures eventually gave up, retreating across the ice. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. Leora looked at him, glowing softly now, her eyes full of emotion. "You, brave," she said. "We, brave together." Ethan smiled. "Yes, together." They flew over the icy plain, the wreckage shrinking below them. Titan's harsh winds and frozen terrain disappeared beneath the ship's rising engines. Ethan looked at Leora, realizing how much they had been through together. She was not just a survivor. She was a partner, a friend, and something more. As the ship stabilized in orbit above Titan, Leora finally spoke fully. Her voice was musical, soft, and full of wonder. "Ethan, human, thank you." "You saved me too," Ethan said. "We saved each other." She nodded. The bond between them was unspoken but powerful. It had grown through danger, trust, and care. Leora moved to the navigation console. She pointed to a distant system, her hands glowing as she communicated with the ship. Ethan watched as she guided them through space, the ship responding perfectly to her commands. She had a connection not just to the technology, but to the universe itself, it seemed. For hours, they traveled, learning from each other. Ethan learned to read Leora's signals, understanding her thoughts and intentions without words. Leora learned about human habits, language, and courage. They shared stories in small gestures, in soft words, and in the quiet glow of the cockpit. As they approached her home system, Ethan could see the planet below. It was beautiful, with oceans that shimmered under distant sunlight and forests that spread like green blankets. Leora's glow brightened as they descended. She was home. The ship landed safely. Ethan helped her out, supporting her small body. She looked around, eyes wide with wonder. Her people appeared, rushing toward her with relief and excitement. Ethan realized that she had been alone for a long time, and now she was finally back with her own kind. Leora turned to him, glowing softly. She touched his hand lightly. "Ethan, human, forever. Bond," she said. He nodded, understanding perfectly. Their connection would last, even across worlds and species. Her people gathered around, examining the ship and her carefully. Ethan stood quietly, watching. He realized that humanity's strength was not in technology or weapons alone. It was in empathy, courage, and the ability to form connections. That bond had saved both him and Leora. As the day ended, Leora's people thanked Ethan. He smiled humbly. "I only did what any human would do," he said. "I helped a friend." Leora took his hand one last time before joining her people. Her glow was steady and bright, a sign of strength, trust, and happiness. Ethan watched her go, knowing that this bond they had formed was unbreakable. It was a connection that transcended worlds, species, and time. Ethan returned to his ship, preparing to leave Titan. He looked back at the alien planet, at the glowing figure of Leora among her people, and felt a warmth in his chest. Humanity's courage and empathy had made a difference. Their bond with another species had changed everything. As he lifted off, Titan's frozen surface shrinking below him, Ethan knew that the universe was vast and dangerous, but also full of wonder, hope, and connections waiting to be made. Leora had trusted him, and he had protected her. Together, they had survived. Together, they had formed a bond that would last forever. For the first time, Ethan understood the true meaning of humanity, the ability to care, to protect, and to form connections that could survive even the coldest, harshest worlds. And as he looked toward the stars, he knew that wherever he went next, that bond would guide him, a reminder of courage, trust, and the enduring power of empathy. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, but Ethan felt ready. He was not alone. He had a friend, a companion, and a bond that would endure across worlds. Together, human and alien had faced danger, learned from each other, and survived. Their story was only the beginning, but it was a story that would never be forgotten. And somewhere, in a distant world, Leora looked up at the sky, her glow bright, knowing that she had found a human who would never leave her side. A bond formed in the coldest place in the universe would last forever, stronger than any storm, stronger than any danger, stronger than time itself.